Hi, welcome to this screencast on keywords and Ruby. I'll discuss about keyword arguments and how it's being used in Rails. Okay, if you saw the screencast on the DSL, previously I had something like this, where I had a method with period, from, and to. To me, it kind of makes sense to have something from as the first one and then to as the second because there's a sequence to this thing. So logically, you can even though you don't, if you don't even remember the signature of the method, you could remember if it's just a limited number of parameters like two or four. But if it's a large number of parameters in the method, and if they're not logically somehow follow each other, how would you remember? I don't want to remember order in which arguments are passed to a method. So as long as I know the name of the argument, I should be able to call with appropriate values that particular method. So that's where the keyword arguments comes into picture, and there is no keyword arguments in the current Ruby 186 version. So how do we do these keywords? Let's go back to the basics. So as you know, if we have a method, you can have parameters and you can also specify default values for those parameters. And instead of having keyword arguments, there is no such keyword arguments. We're going to simulate the keyword arguments by using an options hash. Notice it must be the last parameter because of the syntactical uh, sugar that Ruby provides. If the last parameter has hash, you can actually omit the braces and then you can just specify foo as some value and bar as some value, right? So you can avoid giving an entire thing within the braces like this if it is the last parameter. And also if you have the options, if you use that as a symbol value uh, to simulate the keyword arguments, your API also becomes open to extension without modifying the signature of the method. And you can add more another symbol value and you can handle the change the implementation without changing the public interface. That's another advantage of having using keyword arguments. This is used a lot in Rails. So you could have once the value of hash is passed into the method, then you can retrieve the value by doing something like this. Options. As we have already seen the basics on hash, this is how we access value. Okay, so that would give my var is the key, and doing options of that particular key will give me the value for it. Okay, let's see how that works. So I'm just going to simplify this signature. Let's call this method. Let's print. Let's initialize the value by calling this foo with, let's say, hash hash. Let's do a quick this kind of a thing, or maybe just say foo has a value of 2. Let's just make it my var since we are already using it. And we'll just print the value of my var here just for seeing what's going on. undefined local variable or method myvar. Let's just do this. We had to pass it as a symbol, that's the problem, right? So myvar is going to take some value, and let's run this. Now it gets the value. Okay, remember it has to be a symbol since it's a treated like a constant. Symbol is just like a string, but there is only one. Um, it's kind of like a label. You can think of it as a label. There is only one label. Okay, there can be only one symbol, so it's a kind of unique identifier. You can think of it that way. So when you pass this, and you can see you can get its value. But what if you have like lots of values that you need to pass into the method into options? Then this is going to get really tedious, right? You have to initialize each and every variable. And if you don't provide any values, you can also just do like this. Provide some default value for some integers or strings or whatever. So let's go back to the point I was discussing before. How do you avoid the tedious initialization of all the variables? Setting defaults, uh, is there a shortcut for setting all the values to the values that's being passed into this method? Hash has a method by which you can do a merge, but if you are using you can use the merge method in hash that will merge everything. For instance, let's say you can have uh, symbol like my var, okay, has some value, and if you do a dot merge and you pass in the options, let's print this. What happens in this case? I'm passing some value. This SV is going to get overwritten by the passed in value. That's what happened here. I merged it, right? If you have many parameters, you can actually merge. This could be the default values that you could have in your method if the caller does not pass in values for it. You could have some default values instead of doing that OR thing I showed you before. And then just do a merge with whatever they pass in, which you can just merge it with this hash. If you're using Rails in active support, there is a method called reverse merge. That's exactly opposite to this merge that we did right now. That would look like options dot reverse. This reverse merge won't work here since I'm not having active support. I haven't included that library in this file, but you can specify some default value for size and default value for velocity. So this is actually taking the options and it's using the default values, and these default values will override. Okay, the Rails documentation says this reverse merge allows for reverse merging where the keys in the calling hash wins over those in other hash. This is particularly useful for initializing an incoming option hash with default values. So what this means is the default size and velocity is only set if the options passed in does not already have those keys set. That's what the reverse merge actually means. In this merge, we just over we this merge Ruby merge actually you saw that it is overriding even if it's already there. But in this case scenario, we just want to provide values only if those values were not provided. So there are two different um, scenarios. So that's how this works, and so it has a lot of benefits as I explained. One is you don't have to remember the order in which arguments are passed, and it also allows extensibility of your API. You can change the implementation later without changing the signature. And another thing is, one last thing is you can skip arguments, right? So three things. So hope you found this screencast useful, and if you enjoyed it, please recommend me on Working with Rails. God bless.